This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, this is the June 14th meeting of the Advanced Recurrent Prostate Cancer AnCan group. We meet 4 times a month, first, third Mondays, and the second and fourth Tuesdays. And this is Tuesday, and we meet a little bit earlier on this one at 6 o'clock. So invariably, some people start joining in on this call about 2 hours from now, getting their time mixed up because it's a little bit hard to track, but you guys are all on. I want to mention at the beginning that we are thankful for being sponsored by two pharma companies, two large pharma companies who've taken the initiative to see the advantage of groups such as ours, peer group, support groups such as ours. That's Bayer and Pfizer, and they gave us each gave us a generous donation to back our peer support group program, which is a volunteer effort. None of us are paid employees. We put our time and energy into this and help each other the best we can. We are not medical professionals per se in terms of what we do here. There might be medical professionals on board on our calls. Indeed, there are some, but they're here because they're patients, not particularly because they're here to offer medical advice. So this is a very strong group. Many of us have been going for years together on this and know each other quite well. If we haven't met in person, we're very familiar with each other and respect the journeys that we're all on, the challenges that we all face. It's a windy, twisty road for sure, and because things keep changing in the medical profession with treatments and scans and all kinds of different applications relative to prostate cancer. We try to stay up to date and educate each other and keep each other on our toes and make suggestions so that we all stay in the game as long as possible, because that's the objective, to be in this for the long haul, the long run. Okay, so with that introduction, the way we begin, and I'm gonna ask for some help on this because I'm traveling. I don't have my normal notebooks, and I failed to print out my my questions. New people. I'll ask a couple of them, but if anybody has one,
I mean, I can do it. Some of it, Peter.
Okay. So Russ, you say you're from St. Paul. So just a couple of quick questions, and then Herb will fill in afterwards.
Sure.
How old?
I'm sorry, what was that?
How old are you?
58.
Okay, young guy. And when were you first diagnosed?
Last August.
Okay, so just under a year.
Mm-hmm.
And what was your diagnosis? What was your your Gleason score, PSA, so forth?
Yeah, a 4.5 Gleason, so 9.
Okay.
Gleason. And
were you symptomatic? What led you to?
no, regular checkup. My PSA was just a little over 4.
Okay. And what? So your PSA was a little over 4, and you went to a urologist?
Well, yeah, my GP sent me to a urologist. Yeah.
With just because the PSA was a little over 4, because he was suspicious of something, or did they do a digital rectal exam or feel anything?
Yeah, then they did a digital. Yeah.
And what was their suspicion?
The digital rectal exam we thought they felt a lesion.
Okay.
And then I went for the biopsy. This is a 12-point or 12-point biopsy.
Was the biopsy a guided biopsy?
Yeah.
Okay. good.
Yep.
And what did the biopsy show?
Boy, it was a year ago now.
Out of the 12, what did
I think it was four out of the 12. I think 3 of them were together, and then 1 was off from that group.
Okay. 4 plus 5. Okay, and have you begun any kind of treatment at this point?
Yeah. So they did scans, and they just did a CT scan, didn't see anything. They were going to do a prostatectomy, but then the opportunity came up to do a PSMA before that. So I had the surgery scheduled, but I did the PSMA, and it showed it had spread into my lymph nodes, possibly a rib. So they canceled the surgery, and then I went into chemotherapy, or basically what the doctor called the Piece 1 trials treatment. So hormone treatment and chemotherapy for 6 rounds of chemotherapy over a 3-month period.
And which chemo were you taking? Docetaxel?
It was docetaxel, and then forget the term for the other cell type that they saw as possibly present, and so I went to docetaxel along with carboplatin.
Carboplatin. Okay.
So both then. So the first one was just the one, and then the other 5 were both.
Okay, so I'm assuming they did a genetic test or so, or a genomic test on your tissue, yes?
Yes.
And what did they find?
Oh, boy, what was the terminology on that? Yeah, I don't recall the specific.
But something that they felt they wanted to target with the chemotherapy. That's what I'm hearing. Okay.
Yep, it was aggressive. It's considered an aggressive form, and obviously Gleason 9.
Okay. Well, you're in the right place. There are a number of us, most of us are kind of in the same category. And some of us.
As far as the Gleason number, or the?
Huh? Well,
as
both.
far as the
Gleason score, mutations. Yeah, many of us. I mean, this is the some of us have been dealing with this for years.
Okay.
Where
I
are you
a
being
low number of mutations, I guess.
Where are you being treated?
I'm going to the University of Minnesota currently.
Dr.
Atanarakis, he just came here from Johns Hopkins.
Right. Good for you. I see him next Monday.
Yeah. I see him tomorrow.
Yeah, you're in good hands.
Yeah, you can tell him tomorrow that you stumbled into an AnCan group yesterday, and I bet he'll smile.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And it's not surprising to me that he's treating you this way. You know, when you started talking about peace and carboplatin, I had a feeling that it was probably somebody like Dr. A who was treating you, because he's smart enough to run the mutation, to run the analysis. And clearly, even though you're not sure, and you can come back and tell us next time, he'll show you how to read the report if you ask him. But he's seen some mutations in there that make you eligible for the carboplatin, and it's encouraging that he's treating you. And I assume if it's piece 1, that you're also getting some abiraterone. Is that right?
Yeah. So after the carboplatin, I started abiraterone in February, and then also I've then undergone radiation treatment through Mayo Clinic actually. So some radiation of the prostate, 26 cycles, plus some radiation of where they had. So So after this is 3 cycles of chemotherapy, my PSA went down to below measurement levels. I did a PSMA after chemotherapy. The doctor, Dr. A said that based on the PSA and the imaging, the PSMA, I'm in full remission. But then I believe it's still part of the peace trials where they, or no, I think it's a different trial where they radiate the prostate afterwards and reduces the likelihood of recurrence. So, and then I also had although the PSA was inconclusive as far as the remaining cancer in the lymph node and the rib, I had those lymph nodes and the rib radiated in addition to the prostate. And then I just got my.
How are you feeling? I mean, this sounds. I mean, this is a big blow. I mean, this came out of the blue last August, and
Yeah, it's.
and you're on ADT, and I mean, for a 58-year-old man, I can imagine this is quite a challenge. Are you still working?
Yes, I am. Actually, I'm still working until July 1st.
Okay.
So
How are you handling all this?
Yeah, it's been an emotional roller coaster. At this moment, I am handling it okay. I just got my most recent quarterly PSA, and it's now less than 0.01, so less than you can't measure it.
That's very good.
So I'm at that point going, okay, I have 3 months not to worry too much.
Right.
Anyway.
So, Herb, have I missed any major questions? I can't recall.
I think you got it, Peter. I think you nailed it, Peter.
Okay, Russ, do you have any concerns? I mean, other people are going to probably want to comment on your situation. Do you have any concerns you'd like to address or ask the group?
I don't know. I feel like it has been like you said, it's been a whirlwind of continual chemo, scan, what next, radiation. I got through with the radiation. I've just been recovering from that. I feel like I'm fully recovered from that. I got my first PSA test after radiation, and now I'm at a kind of a what's next stage. But my understanding is now I go to get quarterly tests, and a common thing is eventually something will pop up, and then hopefully it'll pop up somewhere it can be treated. And that's my understanding of the situation. Does that sound right?
Yes, that sounds right. And I'm sure Dr. Antanarakis told you that well, you used the word remission. That's a tricky word. We usually like to use the word management. This at our level, at least at 9 level, particularly with what you've got going on, and most of us have going on, things can lay low for a while, and but we're kind of always watching, keeping an eye on things, and that's why it's great that you have a doctor like Dr. Antanarakis to kind of keep an eye on things as well with you. Make sure he's looking over your shoulder all the time, because this disease is no cure for it at our level, and particularly if it's already gotten into the lymph nodes outside the prostate, it means it's systemic, and it can appear in different places from time to time. But there's a lot of management tools, and many of us have been working with this for years and doing okay with it. So no need to kind of freak out or be scared. And some of us on this call are in your situation, not me, but others are under 60, and we actually have a group for men under 60. The unique situations that some of them face, not being on Medicare initially, and not and having young children sometimes, and et cetera. So I'll open it up if others want to talk to you.
Yeah, let me just jump in with a couple of quick things here. Russ, I picked up your emails, so we've put you in the database. You'll get a reminder before each one of these meetings. I've also signed you up for the under 60s group, which meets once a month on the second Thursday of each month. Yes, it met last week. So it'll meet again in July, and you'll get a meeting for that. And I strongly recommend you attend that. And there's a couple of other groups that might be of interest to you. We also have a group for caregivers. So if you're married and your wife is at all interested, I'll add the caregivers, and you can pass that on, but you can sign up in her own right because she's wondering what's going on. I think the guy I'd like to speak up, who's on here right now, is probably Jim Ward, because this is a situation Jim himself faced at a comparable age 2 or 3 years ago, and we've been working with him all the way along, and we've supported him, and he had to make the decision as to whether to continue working or not. So, Jim, do you have some words of support for us?
Yeah, you bet. Hi, Russ. It's nice to meet you.
Jim.
Yeah, actually, I'm just a year younger than you, but I was diagnosed at the end of 2018. So, you know, like everybody else in this group, I've been through the process of kind of being feeling like you were hitting the head, you know, and dizzy and trying to get your bearings but you know, I certainly agree. You've got a great doctor. You know, I guess the advice that I would give you, certainly with respect to work, I made a decision after, you know, working for under a year. I decided to stop working. I was fortunate to be in a position where I could do that. My wife is still working. And so I made the decision to do that so I could just focus on my health and also have some extra time to do things that I wanted to do and more than work. So I think that's great that you're planning to stop working, but you know, that's one of the issues that gets discussed in the under 60 group is, well, what do you do now with the rest of your life? Whatever that, you have to redefine yourself in some ways because your life changes in ways that you know, you didn't see coming. So I won't dwell on that too much, but I do think there is a process of kind of regrouping and you know, just getting your bearings and trying to figure out how you want to live your life. So it's to me, and I think for a lot of guys in this group, it's kind of a curse and a blessing at the same time, because it has created opportunities to spend more time on things that I care about more than working. And so I just, you know, I'm thankful that you have a great doctor. He's a name that gets discussed in this group often as one of the stars. And I think that you have to just take it one day at a time. Take it, you know, you've got your quarterly test, take that, but you've got a great quarterback who's going to, as Peter said, who's going to help you keep your eye on things and adjust your management plan so that you can address whatever does pop up at whatever point. And so I'm probably not telling you very much that's all that helpful, other than that, you know, I can relate as most of these guys in the group can. And you've joined a group that's very supportive. You know, this group has supported me and given me some great advice along the way. I've made some decisions that I would not have made to my benefit. I don't know that I would have ever even thought about making certain treatment decisions were it not for the input of this group. So I certainly think you're in the right place.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else like to speak to Russ?
Did I miss genetic testing results?
Yes, he didn't have the results, but he does have mutation.
Yeah, so I mean, Dr. Atanarakis did, just as far as the genetic testing, as far as, so I have a Lynch syndrome, which makes me more susceptible to cancer. But Dr. Tanarakis said that generally you'll see a lot more mutations in a cancer that is related to Lynch syndrome, and my cancer has very few mutations. That's the only genetic information I recall. I don't know what other sort of information you get out of genetic testing.
Well,
Russ, you and I have very similar profiles. I'm also a Gleason 9 with Lynch syndrome. I've been going for 8 years now. 8 I know of. And as I said, I'm meeting with Dr. Antanarakis next Monday to look at next steps for myself. I'll be leaving the cities in 2 weeks, going back home to Maui, but I will be here the end of July. I'll be here all of August, September, and October, and I would love to sit down and have coffee or lunch with you when I return. So I will keep an email contact with you and get together, because we have a lot of similarities. So,
Okay, that sounds good. What was your name again?
My name is Peter, last name Kafka, Kafka. I'm the one with the ball cap. And,
yeah, I can see your picture.
Right. Anyway, I'll keep in touch with you. As I said, okay. I might not have a chance before I fly out in a couple of weeks, but for sure I'll get together with you when I come back.
Sounds good.
I don't meet many other guys with Lynch syndrome and prostate cancer. It's not a very common. I mean, it's not. Usually, it's colorectal cancer that guys get. Is probably Dr. Antanarakis.
Yeah.
Probably a 50% proclivity for colorectal cancer, but 1 in 100 of us get prostate cancer.
So in your case, did they determine that the cancer was related to the Lynch?
It's most likely, and that's going to lead, when I talk to Dr. Antanarakis, that's going to be number one on my consideration of what's the next treatment, and it relates to treatment for the Lynch syndrome. I've gone through chemotherapy, I've gone through radiation, I've had surgery as well. So I'm in for the long haul, but I'm not going anyplace.
Okay.
So, one of the important things with Lynch syndrome, Russ, is, as Peter will tell you, that you now are very diligent about monitoring other cancers. Peter, did you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, as I said, there's a 50% proclivity toward colorectal cancer, so they usually recommend colonoscopies every year. I do one usually every 2 years, both upper and lower. And there's other cancers as well that Lynch syndrome has a tendency to trigger. So you got to be on the lookout for things. But in your situation and my situation, prostate cancer is immediately enough to handle, but you just got to keep your eyes out for other symptoms for sure, and make sure you stay proactive.
And I do have an appointment on Thursday, day after tomorrow, at the, what's it called?
It's a upper GI, or it's a GI specialist that is, they're familiar with Lynch syndrome, and it's specialty care. It's through U of M.
For that, so I to get me on a more regular colonoscopy type of.
Well, don't let anybody scare you, but just be alert. Have your eyes wide open on this one.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Thank you.
You know, and the other thing, I hear your wife there, and hopefully you'll come into the caregivers group, and you are very welcome in this group too. So you don't have to doesn't just have to be Russ. It can be both of you. We love having caregivers in this group too, if you've got questions. But obviously, it sounds like this Lynch syndrome was discovered as a what's called a germline or inherited mutation. So you have to be concerned whether you've passed it on, and you also have to be concerned if your siblings have it. And the tests that are done usually, and you can check with Dr. Antanarakis who he did it through, but most of them have a break if you want to get your kids tested or your siblings want to test. Since he did it probably through University of Minnesota, it might be with Invitae. But they all have a program where you can your kids can check, and then if they see that they're carrying it, they can be more diligent. And probably, I mean, Dr. Antanarakis is very savvy about these genetic and genomic cancers. So you can ask him as to what other cancers you should be diligent about other than colorectal. Colorectal is the big one with Lynch, but it's not the only one. Peter probably knows better than I do now because he's read up more, but there are other cancers too. And you know, a good starting place to talk to is Dr. A. He'll be really good on that. But I did want to mention that on the 29th. Yeah, the 29th of June, which is the last Wednesday in the month, we're actually going to run a webinar on genetic and genomic mutations and testing, which will be really helpful for many people, including you and your wife, Russ. And we're going to explain what the difference is between genetic and genomic. And we're going to talk about the genetic tests. We're going to talk about the genomic tests. We've got two speakers. One is the co-principal investigator for something called the PROMISE trial, which you should probably register for. And the other is from Foundation Medicine. That's one of the companies that does the testing. It's going to have a prostate cancer flavor, but it's going to be cancer agnostic. And just today, we heard that Dr. Pamela Munster, who is the co-leader of the UCSF Center for BRCA Research and herself carries the BRCA gene germline. She's going to host it. She's fantastic. So she's going to host it and introduce it and ask some questions. It should be a really good event. So mark it in your diaries, and we'll be sending out the flyer on that over the next couple of weeks, and you can sign up.
Hey, Russ, before we move on, there's one other thing I'll mention, and you'll probably see it in your genomic profile. If not, talk to Dr. Antanarakis about it. Because I don't want to confuse you or point out too much, but there's one other marker that guys with Lynch syndrome, or women with guys with Lynch syndrome need to pay attention to, and that's called MSI, which stands for microsatellite instability, MSI, and they'll probably say it's either high or stable. And, it's an important marker to take note of. And you can talk to Dr. Antanarakis about the significance of that. We won't go into it this evening, but it does open the door for certain targeted treatments if you qualify. I just want to mention that this is something else that you might want to just inquire about when you meet them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I see one other person. I'm not sure. Who was maybe new. Richard Kramer.
No.
AMO. Is that new or?
Crammon.
No,
Yeah,
no,
I've been on before.
I've been on before. Okay. Okay. Well, we're gonna have time for everyone. I didn't. Some Carlos and Dennis McGuire and Jim Barnes, Stan Friedman, a few others. I haven't queried about whether they wanted time, but we'll also. And there's someone on the phone as well. I see. We're gonna
Yes,
move on. To some.
could caller, if you're on the phone, could you, David, we know you're on the phone, but could you, if you're on the phone, could you identify yourself?
Yeah, hey guys, it's Jim Ward. I had to kick over to the phone because we're having stormy weather and it's messing up my internet.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
You bet, thanks.
Okay. So let's, Pat Martin, you said you had something this evening you wanted to bring up.
Thank you for the time. My PSA has been bouncing around 0.3 for 6 to 9 months. Well, the last time I had my PSA checked on the 3rd of June, it was 1.2. It had quadrupled in 30 days, in 3 months. So I'm rescheduled to get another PSA test on the 1st of July, and they've changed me from prednisone to dexamethasone. Dr. Schweitzer was presenting in Chicago, so he didn't have a chance to look at it right then. I only saw his PA, which she's phenomenal. So Monday they had me scheduled, and so looking forward to it, see how things are going. And you mentioned the MSI high. I am that, and I am high on it. So it opens the door for Keytruda. And it looks like that would be my next step in this whole process. I've spent about 5, maybe 6 years on abiraterone, and I think it just kind of quit working. So, which is usual. Anyway, just thought I'd update that.
Yeah, PSA jump like that gets your attention. It got my attention recently that way too.
Yeah.
And I'm on the Keytruda search myself right now. Yeah.
Are you lined up to get it?
Not yet, but that's going to be. I just talked to Dr. Schultz about that yesterday, and he strongly suggests that. And I'm going to get a second opinion from Dr. Antanarakis Monday, and probably that's the way I'm going.
Yeah. Dr. Schweitzer and I talked about it about a year ago. What is the next step that I'd be looking at? And we determined that would probably be the next one. And so it's just a matter of getting the insurance to okay it. And I think, I don't know. We'll see after this PSA test in July. Don't really look forward to going into Seattle on 4th of July weekend, but that's okay.
Okay.
I mean, it should be a slam dunk, Pat, because if I'm not mistaken, the approval for Pembro was extended to all MSI highs. It was changed to it has a bucket approval, which would be cancer agnostic. So if you're MSI high, your insurance is required to cover you with pembrolizumab or maybe one of the other anti-PDL ones. I think it's pembrolizumab, but it could be one of the others.
Yeah.
And that's really what you should ask Schweitzer. It's probably a non-issue with insurance. It's more your own decision.
My insurance is great. I pay $6 for a 3-month supply of Abby.
Right.
Well,
So
Well,
they have not declined any treatment he's recommended.
Yeah, Dr. Schultz said to me yesterday that that it's free, that it's covered.
Good.
Anybody else have any questions about this? Has anybody gone through this treatment that's on the call tonight? I'm not sure if anybody has.
I think Carl used it for a little bit, but it was in amongst a bunch of other tests and
Yeah.
trials, and
That's right.
didn't get a clear read on anything.
Right. Yeah, it didn't work for Carl. Carl got it in a trial along with one shot of actinium. But yes, we've probably had over the past 2 or 3 years, maybe half a dozen or so guys that have had an anti-PD-1, usually Keytruda, with varying results. I mean, the biggest issue for me, and maybe we can get Len to say a few words on this because he was much involved, is that there can be for some people side effects because it can attack you can have an autoimmune response to it. And that autoimmune response can often impact the thyroid, and it can result in other side effects like itching and rashes and goodness knows what. But we've seen it. Len, do you want to say a little bit about what you know, with the side effects of Keytruda, etc.?
Sorry, I had to unmute. Yeah, I think most of us are familiar with the ramping up of the autoimmune system when you take these drugs, which, that's the big caveat. We're trying to step up the immune system to fight the cancer, but it's a kind of a fine line between fighting the cancer and overdoing it, over ramping up the immune system to the point where it attacks your own cells, hence autoimmune reaction. And yes, oftentimes it's the thyroid, it could be the colon, typically organs or cells where there's a high turnover, rapidly dividing cells. They're most prone to genetic problems.
There is a genetic or some kind of test. I did a mouth swab a number of years ago with Dr. Turner, prostate oncology specialist, that determines whether you'll tolerate Keytruda, and I came out favorable on that. I have it in my notebook. I could email you the name of the thing. I don't have, it's not a lot of data on it. I think it's something developed by maybe a university student at UCLA. I'm not exactly sure. I can't remember it, but it was a simple mouth swab, and the results came back saying I was favorable in terms of tolerating Keytruda. So it's something I could email you, Pat, after the meeting and let you know what it is, because I've got it, but it's in another room here.
Hey, Peter, this is Carlos.
I would appreciate that, Herb. Thank you. Or Peter.
Go ahead, Carlos.
Just on that same point, yeah, we have spoken about that before. There's a gal at UCLA, your doctor there locally, can probably talk to her directly and have that sent to his office, and they process it. Simple mouth swab. It tells you whether you're susceptible and the degree of susceptibility to side effects from Keytruda. So if it's there, I would certainly get it. That's what's being recommended. At least you know what you're up against as far as any autoimmune response.
Also, this is John. That oncological cardiologist that I interviewed last year also said to watch out for your heart when you're on pembrolizumab.
What would be the side effects towards my heart?
It was let's see. Now I'm straining my memory here. I think it was an autoimmune phenomenon, like autoimmune carditis or myocarditis, or maybe it was pericarditis. I can't remember, Pat, but I can look it up and probably put it in the chat by the end of the group.
Very good. That's all I got. I appreciate your input. I value your input. Thank you.
I have a question about MSI. Is that the same gene as MSH2?
MSH2, MSH6, and so forth are the actual gene mutations indicating Lynch syndrome.
It's a different,
6 of them.
it's a whole different category.
Oh.
The MSH, I think it's 1 through 6, are all different types of Lynch syndrome. Excuse me. MSI stands for multi-satellite instability. And it is something I think that is, it may be related to the mutations, but it's more, it reflects the likelihood that your cancer is unstable and therefore more susceptible to an immune therapy like an anti-PD-1.
How does it show up on your somatic gene testing?
It
If you're
is
MSI
a separate measure. It's a separate measure. So on Foundation Medicine, it's right there on the top, on the right. If you have a Foundation Medicine report, you'll see an MSI rating at the top. But I don't think, and I'd have to defer to somebody else, but I don't think it's the MS is the same MS as the genes, but I'm not 100% certain about that. People like Herb may know that. That's more of a Herb or a Leng question. But what I will say is that check the front of your report, and that'll tell you what you are. The other thing I'd strongly recommend is listen to Professor Bill, God rest his soul, and his what did he call it? Genomics 101. It's a webinar that we have, and Bill explained all of that really well, what the MSI was and various things. Some of you on here probably remember when Bill gave us that webinar about 3 years ago or 4 years ago. Right, Peter?
Yes, yes. And Pat, there's quite a bit of information pertinent to you in the chat window. Len put in the name of the Keytruda test, the ImuDx, ImuDx, and talk to your doc about that. I'm sure you can track it down.
What I'll probably do is email him and ask him if I can do that when I get my blood draw on the 3rd of July.
Sounds like a good plan. Okay, anybody else have any?
Yeah, I'll put the webinar. I'll put Bill's webinar in the chat window for you in a second.
Anybody else have any comments for Pat or thoughts? Okay. Next on my list is Tom Jacobson.
Thank all of you.
Here we go. Yeah, just a couple quick things. One is I'm on ADT and have been on ADT for the last year. I just stopped taking Lupron and started taking Orgovyx, Relagolix, or however you pronounce it. So it's nice just in the fact that it's a daily pill instead of a 3-month shot in the butt or was taking Degarelix, which was a monthly shot in the gut. So we'll see how this goes. So far, as far as I know, my PSA is still undetectable. I did have a question. I think for Rick, I saw some notes go by on a session I missed. Something about, and I can't remember the name of the drug, but you guys, it was not spelled out all the way, but it was something versus enzalutamide, and I've been taking enzalutamide for about a year, and maybe Rick, you know what I'm talking about. It's sort of implied that there's something else better than enzalutamide, and I don't remember what it was.
Yes, I'm going to turn this over to Len to talk about. Go ahead, Len.
You're probably thinking of darolutamide.
Yeah, I probably am.
Yeah, it's like enzalutamide. It's a second generation high potency androgen receptor blocker. However, the difference between darolutamide and enzalutamide is that darolutamide does not cross the blood-brain barrier, so you don't get the kind of brain fog or cognitive deficits with darolutamide that you often see with enzalutamide. And most guys feel a lot more physical fatigue as well with enzalutamide when compared to darolutamide.
That's interesting. And how does that translate into availability? Enzalutamide can be outrageously expensive unless, of course, you get into the manufacturer's program, which I did, and I'm not sure how difficult it is to get into it. But anyway, so for me, it's free, the enzalutamide. But what about the other one?
Well, probably the same reimbursement issues. Peter Kafka has been getting darolutamide for free for years, right, Peter?
Yeah, about 3 years. I'm on the Bayer program, and they send it to me every month. It doesn't even go through my insurance.
Yeah, Tom, do you have Medicare?
Yeah, I'm on what is it? Medicare Advantage, but it's not going through Medicare Advantage. It goes directly through the manufacturer. Sounds like the same as Peter.
Richard Wasserson, you wanted to say something?
No, I'd like to ask a question then. I mean, I'm interested in these drugs and not on them at this particular time. But Len, I think the very first time in one of these groups was probably 3 or 4 years ago when I met you, and you had been at a Bayer-sponsored workshop where they were doing a round table, a focus group, pre-marketing. They didn't even, I mean, it would have been illegal to have done that in Canada. I'm based in Canada, everyone. But you said the party line that it's less likely to cross the blood-brain barrier. But has anyone ever published, say, darolutamide against apalutamide or enzalutamide and actually shown that it is cognitively better? I think they're pitching it that way, but I'll ask Peter, anybody on here, does anybody know if that's actually been shown in a properly designed clinical trial, or is it simply an extension of the presumption that it's not cost?
You're not going to ever get a clinical trial comparing two second-generation anti-androgens. The companies won't do it. So there's no way it's going to happen.
Is there any objective data other than a presumption that it ought to be cognitively better? And in fact, it is true that the side effect report is you feel better on darolutamide generally than on enzalutamide. But in terms of cognitive presentation, do any of you know? I don't know.
I mean, I think we just have a lot of anecdotal evidence in this group that people who switch from enza because they have what they call brain fog, that disappears if they switch to darolutamide.
Okay.
I'll tell you from firsthand experience that Len and I probably would not be very good moderators on these calls if other drugs. I mean, I was on Zytiga for a year, and I'll just say it messed up my.
I didn't ask about Zytiga. I mean, that's abiraterone. I'm asking about the second generation androgen receptor blockers.
Oh,
No, that's what I'm saying. Darolutamide allows a lot clearer thinking from my standpoint than anything else I've been on. Probably Lynn would say that too.
Like Herb says, don't you feel like over time the ones that are really not as effective slowly fade out rather than drug manufacturers? One of them is a winner and one of them is a loser if they go head to head. They won't forget that, so they tend not to fund the same study comparing them. Just haven't been paid.
Larry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Oh, sorry. Is that better?
Yes.
Don't you feel like the policy kind of understanding between drug manufacturers is, eventually the drugs that are not as effective or less effective or more side effective will slowly fade away, but rather than fund a head-to-head, nobody would want to fund head-to-head because someone's going to be a loser. The winner doesn't necessarily win against another third party or a fourth party. So I think they would shy away from that, like Herb says, just not a practical monetary benefit.
Right.
Is that, Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true, Larry, and I take Richard's point that this is all somewhat subjective. I mean, Richard, we've got some studies on the website that Len has posted. I shouldn't say studies, I should say papers. And you can search the website for darolutamide, and you'll see a number of posts that Len has made in the past where he has reported comparisons. But most of those comparisons are based on the reporting of side effects from each drug. And then they kind of looked at how many people complain about this side effect or that side effect or the other side effect on each of the alternatives, apalutamide, enzalutamide, abiraterone, and darolutamide. And repeatedly, the darolutamide has come up with a better rating than the other drugs when it comes to cognitive issues. Now, yes, it's subjective because people are reporting what they feel and what they see, and we don't have the type of head-to-head comparative study that you'd like to see. I think that there may have been a couple that were done in roundabout ways. Len, do you remember?
No, well, Ben just posted something.
Okay.
That I think really addresses the issue, which is a study where they did a crossover between Dara and Enza in France and asked people to evaluate cognitive and how they felt. And it seems like they preferred Dara.
Now, a question, were those people just only taking enzalutamide or darolutamide as their ADT, or were they taking something with it? Because I find that's the stuff that gets really confusing is,
good point.
Enzalutamide is one piece of the puzzle, but I'm also taking now Orgovyx. I was taking Degarelix. So it gets really difficult to decide, well, this is a side effect of this particular drug. I'm just wondering if anybody else's thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, in almost all of these trials, all of these trials, what we're seeing is with an ADT drug. It could be a different ADT drug. I don't think they necessarily standardize, but there's almost no literature on monotherapy. Now Len, anecdotally, Len and Peter and others in our group and Ken Anderson have all tried monotherapy with second-line anti-androgens. But in terms of the literature, again, I'd refer to either to Herb or Ben or Len, but I don't think there's much. Somebody was trying to get in there right at the same time as me. Who was that?
Richard here again. Richard Russell. So let me, informally, I have been in contact with Bayer up here in Canada about some clinical work that I wanted to do with darolutamide as a first line agent. I'm not an MD, I'm a PhD scientist, and I have some interest in the psychoactive aspects of these drugs. And the answer they gave me is, well, we got a problem. We are not legally authorized to use it as introductory monotherapy. And that if I wanted to do a trial, we don't have it. It's not been approved, and I don't think it has been in the USA either as a official. It's an off-label use as monotherapy for these second-generation agents.
Right. You need a doctor who'll go to bat for you, and both Len and I have found that the case in our situations. And so, it's one comment I'll make. In our society, we have no trouble with big money sports teams going head to head, whether basketball or football or anything like that. There's winners and losers. But for some reason, we don't let the drug companies go at it. Maybe we should. Maybe we should create an arena where they can go head to head.
I think the one thing.
I will talk to some of the Bayer reps or medical liaison folks that I know and ask them if they have in any way documented the blood-brain barrier phenomenon with darolutamide, and I'll get back to you on that.
Good deal.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a valid question. All we have to go by is the fact that guys who have been on one of the lutamides and switched to darolutamide, they almost invariably say that darolutamide is much easier on their cognition and fatigue levels. And we have not just Bayer people, but top medical oncologists in the country, like Alicia Morgans, and lots of top names who do use that expression of not crossing the blood-brain barrier. Are they just going by empirical observations?
No, Len, they're public. Len, I'm looking at a publication right now.
Yeah.
Where they use labels Enza and Dara and show that in the abstract, they say there's 10-fold less penetration of darolutamide versus Enza into the CNS.
Oh, great. Well, there you go.
Interesting.
No, I didn't doubt that fact. That was established. I knew that, Herb. I was saying that it's also a secondary to show that it really has a cognitive benefit, and I actually think it does. But it's also intriguing because at the beginning of next month, the European Association of Urology is having its meeting, and in fact, I'm invited to a workshop on fatigue and prostate cancer, and guess who's sponsoring it? Bayer. Okay, so they're running with this.
Surprise!
Yeah.
Surprise!
Yeah.
Hey guys, this is a great conversation, but I want to move on to make sure that Ben and some others have a chance. We've gone on quite a bit with this, but
Peter,
there's more explanation. Huh?
There's an important issue that we haven't addressed, and we need to before we leave this for Tom, which is, Tom, the approval for Nubeqa darolutamide is a lot more restrictive than the approval for enzalutamide and apalutamide and abiraterone. So it's not just a question of saying, I want to switch across. It's a question of whether you're qualified to switch across. And you have to be, that they basically created their own space for this. And officially, you have to be what's called non-metastatic castrate-resistant.
Oh.
Now, how can you be non-metastatic castrate-resistant? Because you're castrate-resistant, it almost implies that you're metastatic. Well, it's because they used very old technology to find that. So they didn't really see all the metastasis, but if it didn't show up on the old technology, it was good enough for them to qualify you as non-metastatic, even though you might be somebody like like Jim Ward or Russ, where we needed better technology to see the metastasis in the lymph nodes. But for them, they would have been considered non-metastatic. And if their LHRH drug stopped working, then they were able to get the darolutamide. Now, more recently, they've just gotten a slightly wider expansion for the use of darolutamide. I forget what it is right now. One of the guys may remember, but it's the biggest issue with darolutamide is being able to get it. It's not easy to get.
Thank you.
Okay. So some of the guys who came in a little bit later, Jim Barnes, Carlos, whoever else, Scott, I see is on, Alan Moskowitz. If you would need time tonight, because we can probably get to some of you, please put your, rather than polling you here, put something in the chat window letting us know that you would like time. I see Carlos has the hand up. I got that. Okay, let's go to you. I don't want to miss you tonight. The floor is yours.
I'm sorry, who is you? Are you talking to me?
Ben, yes, you're up.
Okay. So the short version is that I had a lung biopsy late last month that was positive for prostate cancer. I've known since December 2020 that I had lung nodules that were suspicious for Mets. They showed up when I had a PSMA PET scan to guide my salvage radiation or impending salvage radiation. I paid $7,000 for the scan because it was just a few weeks short of approval. And the PSMA found nothing. But the CT part of it found that I had these growing nodules, which were still too small to biopsy. So I did not want to go through with radiation to the pelvis if my cancer was in my lungs. So I had a prostatectomy. So this was going to be salvage radiation. So we did a little test. I just had ADT and we did another CT scan to see whether the nodules would shrink. And they did not shrink. And we concluded, okay, these nodules, and in general, lung nodules can mean a million things. These nodules were not prostate cancer, and I went ahead with the salvage radiation. However, as soon as so I had ADT for a year along with the salvage radiation, and as soon as the ADT wore off, my PSA started to rise steadily, and the nodules grew to centimeter size so they could be biopsied. Over 10 weeks, my PSA rise has been exactly linear. I actually did a linear regression for gearheads, and it's been like 0.017 a week, and it's now up to 0.26. So the Mets look like the primary tumor, which is probably a good thing. I'm going to get to develop a treatment plan. I'm going to get another PSMA PET in 5 weeks. There's actually, Rick has written about this, there's actually a PSMA PET backlog at MSK. Because it's a knock-on effect of the CT contrast issue. People who are going to get CT scans with contrast are being urged to get PET scans, PSMA PET scans instead. And of course at MSK, that's a lot of guys. So so there's a 6-week wait, but that's not a bad thing. That can be a feature, not a bug. I'll have more PSA to look at. I may have a better PSMA scan at that point. So that will lead us to a treatment plan, depending on what else they find. The CT scan suggested that my liver was clean, and Dr. Rathkoff said that's a good thing. You die faster with liver mets than lung mets. So that's my bright spot.
So this is Alan. Ben, I also have lung nodules. They were found cancerous by PSMA last October by a scan done at Mount Sinai. It was one of the first there that they approved after Medicare. My question to you is, how long were you on Lupron and before you did a rescan to see that your lesion didn't shrink.
So, yeah, ordinarily they would have given me whatever it was, 3 months. And I decided, based on what appeared to be evidence, that to keep going for a year. So my radiation stopped last May, but I kept the ADT going. I had my last shot in September. It was a 3-month shot. So I had exactly a year of ADT. I started and ended in December.
And so in 1 year, well, you had the ADT, but before ADT, was there, or with ADT or before radiation, you had no shrinkage? Did I misunderstand that?
So I had this scan before the salvage radiation to see if there were possibly lymph nodes that the radiation should be targeting. And at that point, they found in the CT scan that the lung nodules have been growing. This is without any ADT. This is untreated. So rather than going directly into the radiation, we first did a course of ADT for like 3 months and kept an eye on the nodules, did another CT scan, and the nodules did not change size. They didn't get larger and they didn't get smaller,
Okay.
which we took to be an indication that they were negative for prostate cancer, because we hypothesized that they would have shrunk with the ADT.
But your PSA went down in that 3 months.
PSA was completely controlled. Yeah, it was unmeasurable during that entire time.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I haven't had that second scan yet. My doctor wants to wait 6 months, but he cautioned me that PSA drops faster than the tumor will shrink. So given what you've said, I won't hold out a high expectation for too much in the way of shrinkage, and I'll expect I'll need the Lupron and Enza that I'm on for at least a full year to start. So your experience is somewhat helpful and informative for me.
This is Richard Crammon. I was diagnosed like February when the CT scan, and there's 135 nodules, and then went on the chemo and the ADT at the same time. And then after 3 rounds of that in May, the largest went from 0.6 millimeters to 4 millimeters, which, you know, we're all happy about. But I'm the oddball who never had a PSA above 2. I was diagnosed at 2. I'm now down to 0.2, but who cares? It isn't a very good indicator. That's interesting about the nodules possibly being benign. I have not heard that before.
Yeah, it's in most cases they are benign, or if not, they are not cancer. They're something else.
Right. Yeah, it's not uncommon. This is why we try to urge you to biopsy those nodules, and that becomes tricky because it can be done endoscopically, or it can be done with a needle, and it all just depends where they're located. I mean, I was talking to somebody over on Friday night who has a situation with a lung nodule, and it's very easy to do it because of the location with a needle, and it poses absolutely no threat. But there are other situations where a needle biopsy to the lung can be dangerous. We've got docs on the line, and they can probably explain that to you better than I can. But, you know, a couple of things I just want to say about lung nodules. So many of you who are on this call are familiar with Jerry Dean. God bless him. He's not in a very good way right now, and I don't think he'll be with us a lot longer. but they first diagnosed lung nodules in Jerry that were prostate cancer in 2006. 2006. So that's 16 years ago, if my math is correct. So they can be managed, but we need to know that that's what they are. And for the longest time, Jerry never expressed much PSA for years and years and years, and then finally he did, and it started going up pretty rapidly. But I guess the point that I want to make is that lung nodules, even if they're prostate cancer, are definitely manageable. And they're more manageable today than they were 16 years ago. So take that as, for those of you who are facing that issue, I hope it's some encouragement.
It is.
Yeah, Richard, this is Alan. How long did it take for your lung nodule to go from 6 to 4 millimeters?
3 months.
And that was 3
Well,
months.
went through 3 rounds of chemo, and then they did another scan and compared them. But they never got above 0.6 centimeters or 6 millimeters.
Right. And when you say chemo, was it true chemo or is this?
Oh yeah, Doxo.
What is that?
Docetaxel.
Yes.
Okay.
And as it turns out, I'm handling that and the ADT at the same time well. Some of the same side effects, but not any severe.
Dan, any other thoughts on your next steps and journey and what you're thinking?
No, I appreciate. Thank you, Alan and Richard. I appreciate your thoughts.
Thank you.
I mean, there is one little issue that not an issue, but one little fact I think that Ben omitted, which could be very important, is they have sent the tissue off also to be sequenced at MSKCC. Isn't that right, Ben?
That is correct. Rathkoff had said that might be too small to be assayed, but I have not heard any complaints, so I assume that's proceeding.
So we're all keeping our fingers crossed that it comes back with something actionable, because that will make the plan easier.
Yes.
And do you happen to know if they're calling that genetic testing at MSK, are they still calling it impact?
They still are.
What is it?
That's correct. They still are.
Okay.
This is one of these institutional things that they just cling to and believe in. It's like, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So on a side note, talking about shrinkage and this and that, I just did a PSMA scan a couple of weeks ago, and I have the report. I compared it with a PSMA scan, also a PYL scan I did 2.5 years ago at Stanford, and the results came back pretty much identical. No shrinkage, and yet I did 6 months of chemotherapy because of the first scan, which is interesting. I asked Dr. Schultz about that yesterday, and essentially it was like the glass half full or half empty. That, this could be a positive thing. I got, the positive part is I got 2 years out of this. And, why focus on the negative that things are still the same? Well,
So Peter,
I'm holding my own.
Peter, nobody asked you if you needed time. And
No,
you saw
next
you
week.
saw Dr. Schultz yesterday. And what was Dr. Schultz's suggestion as what your next step should be?
Keytruda. I already mentioned.
Okay.
But I'll
you did say.
talk more next week after I talk to Dr. Antanarakis.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else, Ben, that you'd like to talk about?
No, thank you.
Dr. George, you're up.
Hi, everybody. Well, I just sent Russ a message. I want to let him know that not to give up hope, because after a year of all that treatment, it can get pretty frustrating. And I hope everybody else is doing well. I don't really have much. I really enjoyed hearing everybody tonight, and I'm doing pretty well. I mean, all things considering. My main issues are my back right now. Talk about insurance companies. When I first got the cancer, they paid for all the MRIs and CAT scans. I must have had 100 of them, and I had an X-ray which showed one of my screws in my sacrum was loose from the spinal fusion surgery I had twice, and I had an X-ray and they wanted to get a CAT scan, and I got denied twice for the CAT scan. So I finally got that done, and they said I didn't need to have any more surgery, which is good because I've had 2 major back surgeries from the cancer. But everything else is going well. I guess I'm very fortunate at this point. It's been 8 years, and I had initially a Gleason 8 and widespread metastatic disease to the bone, spinal cord compression, and I went through most of the treatments. The combination therapies, the chemo, the radiation to the spine. I went through all that brain fog. I was also on enzalutamide, which back then I guess was not even approved for metastatic disease that was sensitive to ADT. So I was on both Degarelix and enzalutamide. So my PSA started to go back up. Back then, they didn't do anything to the prostate. They just they said, well, you've got it in all your bones. We're just going to leave your prostate alone. And since then, they've done studies which showed debulking the prostate, or even with metastatic disease, increases survival. So now most people are getting radiation and/or surgery, even with metastatic disease. But I had biopsy 3 years ago in New Jersey of my prostate, which 14 cores were all negative for cancer. And so they left it alone, and my PSA started going back up after my ADT. I was on that for 2.5 years, and it stabilized at 0.3, and it's been at 0.3 for the last 5 years, 4 years, 5 years. So my question to Rick was, I've got all these, since I'm now 8 years out and I've become a local celebrity, apparently. Some people thought I was dead because I hadn't been to work in so long. Other people, I've been getting a lot of, what's been happening is I've been getting a lot of referrals, so to speak, just of people that I know, and they know I've been through cancer and treatment and all that. So it's been very rewarding that I get to talk to guys, you know, that are, you know, like in the group here, they're starting their journey and they don't have any clue or any idea where to go. And sometimes I won't even talk to the guy, I'll talk to the family member, because the guy doesn't have any clue as to what, if anything, they want to do. And some guys don't even want to do anything. You know, when they hear bone is spread to the bone, they think it's a death sentence, and it's absolutely not a death sentence. So I guess what I want to ask you, Rick, is you know, can I have some of these people call you, because they call me from all over the country too, and I don't have the connections that you have with all these different docs, and you know, some of these docs are absolutely the people I want to send them to, or different programs that have good you know, prostate medical oncologists, you know, because like you always say, the quarterback is the prostate medical oncologist, and that's what people need, especially with advanced disease. So it's very tough to navigate this stuff. You know, and as you know, Rick, even after a couple of years, I still was clueless as to where to go with it all. So, you know, this group has been life-saving to me. You know, I stopped going for a few years, and I guess it was because I just didn't want to have cancer anymore. You know, like after all this initial treatments, I just didn't want to deal with it. And but now I feel like I want to help other guys, and so I think it's up to me. I'll say for me or us to help these other guys that come along,
Right.
and show them that, you know, it's not a death sentence. And you know, like you said, pulmonary nodules for 16 years. I mean, you don't know where it's going. You know, I mean, I never knew I'd be alive after 8 years. So I'm just very grateful again to the group, and to you, Rick, and Len, and everybody that contributes, because everybody has something good to say, even if it's just to understand each other. Because emotionally, it is a roller coaster. It's a total roller coaster ride. And you can't explain it to the women in your life. You can't explain it to your kids. You know, it can be a very lonely journey. So,
Right.
But that's all I had to say. I just, you know, I wanted to see if you could take maybe if I had somebody that needed some, you know, some local care where they were, that you could help me out with that.
So let me first of all say we're so grateful for you to come on and give a testimony about your own history, because it's very encouraging to a lot of guys on this call to hear what you're saying. And thank you for re-entering the arena. There's always a place for you. You know, you're very dear to us because your mentor was Dominic Moresi, God rest his soul, and Dominic was very, very dear to Len and to myself and to a few other guys who remember him so clearly. And he would be a moderator with us today if he was still alive. Isn't that true, Len? He's probably here in spirit somewhere. Somebody's channeling Dom. The party line is that we really like to try and drive people into the group. So we meet every week. So the best thing they can do is to come into the group. And the reason for that is because personally, I don't have the bandwidth I had 5 years ago because AnCan's gotten pretty big, and I do a fair amount of personal navigation. I don't do as much now as Peter and as Len, and Herb's starting to do more, Ben's starting to do more. the way we work is that the groups are all free and drop in, but if men want personal navigation, we ask them to make a donation in any amount they can afford. We never turn anybody away, but we do that only because we want people to recognize that as advocates, our time is valuable. And for some of us, it has a significant opportunity cost, like Herb, who actually has a very important day job at the NIH. We're not all retired. So you can definitely send them this way. Some of them will come into the group, hopefully, and we'll work with them just like we did with Russ tonight. Some of them, if they need to talk to us personally, that's the only proviso. If they send us $5, it's an acknowledgement. If they send us $50,000, it's an even better acknowledgement. We don't make money an issue in these groups, but what we do make an issue is that we've all got demands on our time in some way or the other, and we may, they may come to me and I may refer them to Peter or to Herb or Len or Ben, depending on who's got, or somebody else, depending on who's got the width. But we don't want anybody to go unsupported. So, how are they finding you, George?
Listen,
George is a national name.
I got friends that have friends that have friends. That's all I can say. And I tell you, I was trying to describe this one guy to my mother tonight. It's a friend of my brother's that I met. He lives in Colorado, that has a cousin that I worked with in the ER that has a niece that has a friend that's her father. That's how many. So what I'm going to have them do, and I think, because I get a lot of times it's the family member that calls, is maybe have the family member come into the group
yes,
with the person to initiate it, because a lot of guys don't even go on Zoom that are in their 70s and 80s. I mean, they don't want to, they don't want to pick up a phone that doesn't have a flip on it. I mean,
they can call in.
Yeah.
They can call in, George. They can still call in. We still make it easy. I want to go to Len. Len, I feel you should have a say in this.
And that 50,000 will pay for maybe a month and a half of enzalutamide, by the way.
Len, what do you got to say on all of this?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's great to see this kind of resurrection of George. We missed him so much the time he was gone. We always look forward to his participation in these meetings. I'm not sure what you're looking for, Rick, but I certainly do welcome back George to the fold. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, just, I mean, the website, AnCan.org, all the information is there.
Yeah.
And have their support people or family or whatever those up, because all our meetings are outlined and it's pretty specific. Well, thank you, George, for your story. And
thank you, guys. Yeah, thank you,
This
guys.
brings up something that I always kind of struggle with a little, not too much, that I think a lot of us who are not like moderators or putting a lot of time consciously, or have people who come regularly, have some level of skin in the game, besides donating something maybe or helping. I know that I'm carrying 2 or 3 current people, 3, who have, advanced disease, but just don't want to go to a group. They're not ready. They're going to oncologists, they're going to urologists, and you just hold steady with them and hope that they will, come to a place, or I believe they very likely will come to a place where they will be seeking support, or their wives or caregivers will be seeking support. So I was just curious. I mean, do a lot of people have the same serious experience or working with some people as 5 and 6 years go by and I'm still alive? Everybody, more people call you, and and just another encouraging thing is that I was diagnosed with metastasis to bones 6 years ago, and almost 6 years ago, and here I am working, feeling good, hoping for the best. I think there's probably a lot of us out there in this group. So everybody should get encouragement who comes here and hear from the people who have this long-term success. And just curious about all these people who are kind of helping other people quietly, not reporting, you know, they don't want me to talk about it. They don't want me to describe it. And I know from years ago, the idea was not to encourage that we act as triangulate with the group and that private person. So I think they have to reach that level where they want to join. But I'm just curious if a lot of people are doing this. You find that they end up doing it for some years.
I think it is going on. I'm sure it's going on. And going back to Richard Wasserman's comment about drug studies, you know, there's no study, but I suspect that peer support, providing help for others, extends overall survival. I don't know if we'll ever prove it, but I think we're all living examples that you help somebody else and it makes you feel a hell of a lot better. So
there is some support for that. But it's somewhat indirect. There's certainly having a partner in one's life extends one's survival. This was a paper published in Current Oncology in the last year, which did a summary of this type of stuff. And for prostate cancer, among about a half a dozen other cancers, having a partner, typically it's a spouse, has better survival value than chemo. Now, that was a review of older data, but and that was the newer double combinations and so forth. But also we know that people who are active in a community, be it a church group or whatever, actually often show better survival, partially because of not only the commitment of those other people to them, but their commitment to the other people. The person who's a loner and has no support typically has poorer health outcomes across the board. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think there is evidence to support the value of support.
yes, and we're here for, I mean, there are people that join our group that are loners and found a huge amount of support, which has been great. Carlos, tell us what's going on. Here's a switch here. I'm on the mainland and Carlos is on Maui. Figure that one out.
Yes, I am. And I'm enjoying my time. Thank you. I do have just a general message, and I don't know if there's any information that's come out, but as you recall, I had my Provence treatment this past November, and so it's been about 6-7 months now. Don't expect my PSAs to really change. They've stayed 0.6, 0.7. So they're just checking that on a monthly basis. My oncologist, Mayo, was able to scan me a PLI, and 2 months ago. Happened, so it was a what-if situation, and the idea is if PSA, if your scan looks worse than it was before, then we move on to lutetium. If it's the same or better, then we just sort of wait and watch. So that's my question. I probably should be seeing him in another month's period of time. His plan is to continue to image me. I don't know when that PLY might become available with Mayo, if they've got their own sources. I don't know yet, but I expect that will be somewhat delayed. My question at hand is, do I just move forward with lutetium, or do I wait and watch?
I think you got to wait for lutetium anyway. Go ahead, Rick.
Well, that may be the truth. However, you know, if the byline is, if you can get it somewhere else, get it started, that's an option.
Herb, you have any comment on that?
Yeah, Herb.
I mean, I heard from, actually, I just heard from Hopkins yesterday that they're resuming Pluvicto on Friday.
Okay.
So I don't know about other centers. So hopefully that means that AAA has gotten their act together.
That'll be good. Don't know how big the backlog is, though. So back to the second half of my question, is there an optimal time after ProVench to pursue a secondary treatment?
I think there is. I don't think we know if there's an optimal time.
We don't know.
One thing we do know is that if you wait too long, then you're not likely to get the right results. I mean, this is a question I'm going to ask Dennis McGuire to talk a little bit about, because he probably is the man who has thought about this the most and has is most relevant here. I mean, your PSA, did you say around 0.6? Is that right, Carlos?
Yeah, when I had my prevention, it had been bumping up from 0.2 to 0.4. It was 0.5 the week of my prevention, and since then 0.6, 0.7, 0.6, 0.6.
Okay. So, I think that you're at a low enough level that you don't have to jump in and you don't have to be too concerned about the backlog. But when your turn comes up, I would do it. I mean, let's first of all recognize, and this is sad but true, that lutetium is not a long-term. It's not a long-term treatment. It seems to work for a period of time, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, and we'll see more as time goes by, because we also have to recognize with lutetium that most men who have been treated with lutetium have been pretty advanced. We don't know what's going to happen if we give lutetium to somebody who has a much lower disease burden. We don't have those results. We don't know what could happen if we gave you lutetium as your very first treatment if you had high-risk disease, whether it was hold. We're not there yet. What we do know is that men who have a higher disease burden, it will hold them for something over 12 months, and then they regress. Now, Al Latimer, who had not had chemo before, but still managed to get in under the wire somehow or the other. He's probably gotten 6 to 12 months out of his lutetium, but his PSA is starting to rise again. So, I think that you've got to look at what's in your, what you've got in your quill and decide when you're going to use it. And for you right now, you don't really want to go back onto chemotherapy, which did work for you. We know that lutetium is in your future, but it's only going to give you a limited period of time. There's another thing we don't know, and this to me is the most fascinating thing about lutetium. Can we give it again? How many times can we give lutetium? If it fails, can we do it like chemotherapy, where you did it, it worked for a while, it stopped, now we go back and we send you in 2 years later for another dose of lutetium? We don't know that yet. We're doing that with chemo. Richard, Dr. Wasserstein, you want to say something?
A couple of things. So many of you don't know me, but I am an academic nerd and a scientist, and I'm interested in this area quite extensively. And I was at, and in fact, it's ending, I think, today, the Society for Nuclear Medicine and Medical Imaging's international conference was in Vancouver here. So I was there for a couple of days. And a couple of things. It's to remind you, the study that got Pluvicto approved by the FDA was essentially the VISION study. And the survival outcome there was not decades or years. It was months mostly. I mean, and furthermore, the other study that was important in this area was a therapy study out of Australia, and that was published at the ASCO, the American Society of Clinical Oncology meetings. You may have already discussed this, but it showed no survival benefit, better quality of life, but not actually survival benefit. Now, if any of you have heard any talks about lutetium, you would probably saw spectacular slides by the German group led by Cordachville, which shows patients, one or more, who were advanced patients that was selected for imaging in the papers, who had really high PSAs, like over 1,000, who lit up with mets like a Christmas tree. So I have a thing I do whenever I hear these talks, and I must have seen 6 talks over the years with that picture from Cordachville. And I have a question, is that patient still alive? And Dr. Baruch from Arizona was the person presenting the talk. And I don't know if this is apocryphal and she was just running off or this is true. But according to her, from that paper from 2016, 2017, the patient in that picture is still alive. So there's a paradox based on an N of one patient, that it may actually be better if you're undertreated in an advanced patient compared to what the results from vision show. But and just adding that on to everything you said, Rick, we just don't know. There are a hell of a lot of lutetium trials underway, looking at it and using it in a whole different variety of earlier situations and so forth. So I think we can say is we don't have an answer to your question, but we can't simply jump. It's available. It's early. Get it now. We don't have data to say that that's better. Rick, was that an okay summary or an addition to what you said?
Yeah, no. I mean, I think it's very much in your with your own judgment. But what I'd love to find out, and we'll see over time, is whether lutetium can become a repetitive treatment, whether we can give lutetium more than once, and and maybe it'll be like these treatments. I mean, I remember when I first started this journey, and there weren't too many things available, but certainly LHRH drugs were available, and we talked about putting men on intermittent hormone therapy, so they take a holiday, then they go back on. And the one thing we knew was each time they went back on, they get a little less than the time before.
Well,
and Richard Wasserzoog is, hold on a minute, Richard Wasserzoog is smiling because this is from his age. He knows this. And maybe lutetium will turn out to be the same thing. Go ahead.
I think you got to remember, lutetium is targeted toward PSMA right now, at least for prostate cancer, right? But it doesn't prevent the emergence of non-PSA positive clones. So if you knock the hell out of all your PSA positive cancer cells, PSMA positive, you may leave clones. Secondly, it's a radionucleotide. Radionucleotides work by DNA damage, right? Then they cause cell death if you can't repair the DNA damage. Well, the question really then is, what about other cells that are resistant to that? So that, there's whole bunches of questions that we don't know. And the other, for example, do we know that prostate cancer has a stem cell? If there are a quiescent stem cell that gives rise to cancer, as in many other cancers, that's not going to be touched by a radionucleotide because it's not dividing. So there's a whole bunch of stuff there that I think are basic questions. There's no question that it seems to knock down PSA in a good number of people who get it. The duration, we don't know yet.
So what do you think, Carlos? Now that you've heard this, let's go back to Carlos.
I have to speak up for quality of life, because that really ultimately is what you have to work with. I have it today. I may not tomorrow. If that day comes sooner because I don't do anything, well, that's a choice that I made. But if I'm trying to maintain that, I think I can live with that much more than not. And so that's where I'm sort of stuck.
And one other thing I'd like to think about, and I don't know that there's data, but we all know about what's the abscopal effect, right? And it seems to me that if you're juicing up your immune system with Provenge, you may have a better chance of having the abscopal effect with something like radioactivity following it. I mean, again, no data, just sort of speculation based on mechanism.
Well, I mean, of course, that's Dr. E. Dr. E thinks that way too. I mean, she likes to give Provenge with a little radiation because she thinks that there's an abscopal effect.
And I think if you go on clinicaltrials.gov, you'll find that's exactly what's happening. They're adding a variety of other agents after the radiation, hoping the radiation releases enough molecules that you can then go after with immunotherapies. Whereas immunotherapies have not been shown to be very effective, maybe they would be after radiation of the lutetium nature. But you might check, actually, Carlos, you might check to see on clinicaltrials.gov if there is an aversion, because rather than simply going on lutetium, you might want to see whether you can get into a trial which has a follow-on immunotherapy. We have no data to know that it's better, but we know that from the Vision trial, it's beneficial, but not that promising. So anything we can do to modify it and look at these issues, as Rick says about timing, as Herb says about abscopal effect, I think enriches the lutetium. Just because it's there, it may not be good enough reason to go in, to take it outside of a trial at this early stage. Herb, was that fair what I just said?
Yeah, I think it's fair. I mean, because I mean, I'm in it, but again, it was before all these trials. But I think if I were going to get lutetium now, I might look at a trial where they're combining it with something else.
Dennis McGuire, do you have anything you want to
Yeah,
weigh in?
Carlos. Yeah, my situation may provide some information for you. I don't know if it's helpful, but I've been on lutetium for 16 months, and I've had 7 treatments. I did, and they both have been through the trial. And I did have a gap of 6 months where my PSA did rise. But while I've been on lutetium, my PSA has been declining.
Well, that's good to hear, Dennis. It gives me hope.
Yeah, the only thing I get a little concerned about is like chemotherapy is over time it can be immunosuppressive. If I track my whites and my reds and my lymphocytes, each time I get a lutetium treatment, the lows get lower. And it takes longer to come back to the starting point. So that's one cautionary fact that I've been really watching.
Okay, that's good to know. I was not aware of that. However, one of my mitigating issues is that my biggest focus of bone cancer is in my hips. So it started off as just right acid area, it was affecting most of the right, part of the left, so that's a huge bone marrow center area. And by treating that, I don't know if I gain back that will reseed to help me maintain my hematopoietic system, or if you're just wiping everything out by default, because that's where the radiation kicks on. My thought is that it really is attaching to those cells that have PSMA, so therefore the others should be undamaged, but I don't really have a feel for that at all.
Okay.
Can I just ask Dennis? Dennis, what is the latest on your PSA? Do we know?
Yeah, 2 weeks ago, it was at 4.
Oh, great.
And
All right.
yeah, and it's probably the lowest it's been in 3 years.
I was just going to ask you, can you remember? I was just going to ask you, can you remember the last time when it was at 4?
Well, my wife and I were shocked when we saw the results because it didn't come back as high. Because, you know, if you're 4 or lower, it's not considered high. But, you know.
Fantastic. I'm so, and how many in this second round now? How many have you completed?
At UFC, I've had 4 treatments.
Okay. And what was your PSA when you started at UC?
300. That was in December of last year.
Okay.
So,
I am through. I put a little mess. I just sent you a little personal message that should warm your heart.
I'll look at
So
it. So, yeah, my update, I'm waiting to hear from UFC on my next treatment. The last I heard, they were thinking end of June or early July. So based on my schedule, I'm like 2 weeks delayed as of today. So I'm 8 weeks from my last treatment.
okay.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of guys in the queue, and I'm sure in the weeks to come, if Herb is right and they're starting to gear up again, we'll be hearing a lot of reports.
Recorded.
They'll be positive.
I just want to say, Andrea, we're still in our prostate cancer meeting. Our MS meeting will start in half an hour. Okay, it starts at 5:30, the MS meeting. But we'll be closed and reopened by then. We'll be closed for business with prostate cancer and we'll reopen for business for MS. Goodbye. Sorry, guys.
I think we're at the end of the list that I know of, unless there's anybody else who's
Wow.
some thing that, you know, some of you came in late, so whatever, but I think hold pretty much everybody. Is everybody okay with the way things stand now? We're down to only a couple dozen of us yet.
Great job, Peter. We've had a new guy. We got around everybody. Anyone else have anything on their mind they want to bring up?
I just want to say thank you to all those who chipped in there. Just it's a lot of information, trying to decipher it all, try to see what makes sense. And it's good to have the feedback to work with. Thank you.
I agree. We all have plenty of homework to do.
Yeah. You know, I mean, you see the value of the brains trust here. I mean, it's, you know, we say it's a brains trust. I mean, you know, tonight we had 3 medical MDs, we had 2 academics, or 1.5 academics. Herb's gone, so I don't know if he still considers himself to be an academic. I can't ask him, but he's certainly an active researcher, and we've got great information here, and when we get talking and we have the time like we did tonight to bounce things around, we pull some great stuff out of these meetings. And Carlos, you know, you'll listen again to the recording and make your notes, and there's good stuff. I just wanted to check in with Mike Yancey. Mike, is everything okay by you? Are you in a fairly stable frame of mind at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I've been working on getting the Pluvicto scheduled and just got a call from Highlands Oncology in Rogers, which of course is just 50 miles away from me. And
Yeah.
they said I've got to do a gallium-68 scan in addition to the Polarify. But he said after that we should be good to go and get it scheduled ASAP. So I'm looking forward to getting that in place pretty quick.
Oh, excellent, excellent. And they're going to take care of this gallium scan of this whatever it is, Locomets or Illucix. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, they're going to do that for me. In fact, hopefully we'll get that scheduled next week. Then I'll meet with the oncologist over there, and then we hopefully get the Pluvicto stuff scheduled soon after that.
Great, 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 great. I'm pleased to hear that. That'll at least give you some peace of mind, man. We'll know more about this other. We'll know more about this Illucix scan. I mean, we know what it is. It's the PSMA 11 that they were doing at UCLA and UCSF, and it's now going to become available nationally. It's probably the gold standard. If you talk to most of the very knowledgeable GU medical oncologists, it's the scan they'd like to see you get is the PSMA 11 scan. But it just hasn't really been available. And like I say, we just learned it became available. That's what I put in the reminder. And I've got a call scheduled with the manufacturer next week, and we'll find out more. And it should be relatively available all around the country because they've partnered with Cardinal Health to make that happen. So we'll now be looking at 3 scans, either Pylarify, Locomets, or Illucix. It's spelled Illuccix. However, I don't quite know how to pronounce that. Illucix. Maybe it's, what about the Italian way, Len? How would the Italians?
Well, you know, if it doesn't end in a vowel, it's not Italian, so I can't help you there.
Len, I just got to tell you something very quickly that made me smile. I listened to a soccer game the other day, the England-Italy game, and I listened to it on the recording, and the second half on the recording, it was in Italian. And every Englishman's name ended in an A.
Right. Yeah, it's just the rhythm of the language. They just put it in there whether it's there or not.
Okay, guys.
Okay, guys.
Peter.
Thanks very much. Yay.
Good night, everybody.
Take care. Next week, Monday.
Yeah,
Okay.
next week with her, Monday. Good night.
Yeah, good night.